Okay, so my name is Samuel. I'm the CTO of Workscope, and we've been running for about 3 years. And our business is primarily there to help you understand how spreadsheets are used within your organization. And so our strapline is risk revealed, value made visible. So as I go through this talk, what I'm planning on doing is showing you the two sides to the Excel problem and solution. And so I'll start by going through the slide deck. So typically, Workscope provides dedicated technology to help organizations map, monitor, and improve the spreadsheets and end-user computing environment. And so what we typically do is we take you from the state that we find you in, which is usually a disparate environment whereby you have spreadsheets everywhere. You don't necessarily know where they are, who's using them, which ones are active, if they have VBA code in them, if they're linked to anything. We then analyze the files in their natural state as people are opening, closing, and using files. And through that, we are able to help you optimize and create a situation whereby you have a full understanding and inventory of your spreadsheet environment. And we do all of this automatically without having to move any of the files. So even though we get you in an organized state, this is conceptually organized, but you don't have to change any of your behavior and there's no disruption at all. And so spreadsheets are a unique document type because a spreadsheet is, in essence, it's an application, but it is also a file. This is one of the fundamental problems with spreadsheets. And so if you think about a spreadsheet in essence is an end-user developed application which transforms your knowledge into code on the desktop. So every spreadsheet you build, all the formulas you put in there are code in essence. But the problem with spreadsheets is, unlike any other application, they're still physical files which can be emailed and sent around the organization. So once it's out there, it's almost impossible to keep track of who has it. And the question that we ask ourselves is, okay, we know why spreadsheets exist, but why do they really exist? Why do people continue to use spreadsheets? And there are four main reasons. The first one is often there is no alternative. And so this typically is for smaller organizations or people doing more complex processes or very bespoke processes to their organization or department. And so often they have to do it via spreadsheets because there's no real way of doing it. And sometimes, even if the processes are standardized and you have big IT teams, sometimes it can just take too long with development. So you may ask an IT team to build you something. It may take 3 months in development. By then, your business has moved on. And so it's no longer fit for purpose. And these are one of the problems that we typically find with spreadsheets, why they're not used as much. The third is that no matter what system that you come across, you'll always find in every application an export to Excel button. And the reason why you find this is because most systems can only get you 95% of the way. You always need to download the data and manipulate it to suit your organization. And so no matter what happens, the Excel spreadsheet will still always be there to solve that problem. And lastly, it's still cost effective. Excel is on your machine anyway. So when you start working in any organization, you have it sitting there already. So you can use it to solve problems. And even if it wasn't there and you had to install it, it's often cheaper to use Excel than to get a development team to spend 20 hours building something that's going to save you 5 minutes a day. This is why Excel will always be there. And so what we're really trying to understand today is, how can we understand why spreadsheets exist? And so we know why, the four reasons why they typically exist, but specifically in your organizations, why are people using spreadsheets? And we're going to look at it from 2 points of view in terms of risks revealed and the value made visible. So in terms of risks revealed, these are the typical risks that are associated with spreadsheets. And so we have issues such as key person risk. You may have one or two really good developers building all your macro spreadsheets or really good at writing formulas. And the rest of the team just use these spreadsheets. Or typically you may just have errors in your spreadsheets. And so again, you build a spreadsheet, you use it. No one checks the quality of your code. No one checks your assumptions, your formulas. And so spreadsheets contain a huge number of errors. Another thing is inefficient processes. So in order to use a spreadsheet, you have to build a spreadsheet. And so one of the things that we're looking at is how much time are people actually spending building spreadsheets, then use the spreadsheet. And so these are questions that have been difficult to answer in the past. And this is all around the idea of risk in the spreadsheet. We also want to look at the other side, which tends to be overlooked, which is the value part of the proposition. So here we're looking at the value made visible, which is the second half of what we're trying to achieve. And so if you just look at your environment today, typically in an organization, you have people who have end user computings, i.e. they have their spreadsheets, access databases, and they have to build solutions and they use them to solve problems. They also have a suite of actual applications like Office, Outlook, Power BI, all these other tools. And because these tools are purpose-built, they're more efficient, so it requires less of their time. Spreadsheets, however, require you have to build a spreadsheet before you can use a spreadsheet, so it takes up significantly more time than it should. And what you really want people to do is spend more time with their intellectual contribution. You're paying someone to solve a problem or to perform a task based on their skills. You don't really want them building spreadsheets necessarily. And so what we're trying to do is get you from this state today to tomorrow, whereby you have fewer spreadsheets. Okay, so we're going to look at 2 case studies. Okay, so the first case study we're going to look at is a finance department in a global organization. So there's a finance department consisting of 87 people in a multinational bank, which used our Workscope platform to understand where they were using spreadsheets, where they had risk, where they had EUC risk. And so the primary thing they were interested in was looking to understand spreadsheets which had multiple users. And so to them, the more people that used the spreadsheet, the greater the impact would be if that spreadsheet failed. And so that's what they were interested in. So they really wanted to know, how many multi-user spreadsheets do we have? So when we looked across the whole organization, across this department, we found only 329 multi-user spreadsheets, which includes copies of spreadsheets. And so to them, they were very satisfied that there was no longer a problem because it was a small number of spreadsheets which they could manage. But our platform dug a bit deeper. So this was the risk revealed. But then we looked at the value made visible. And so here, we found that there were actually 2,912 single user spreadsheets, which they'd created in the last 6 months. And of those, there were 1,439 spreadsheets, which were single use spreadsheets. And so by single use, we mean that it was used only once since it was created and had not been used in at least a month after it had been created. And so in essence, they built it for a purpose to solve some problem, and it has not since been used. And of those 1,439, 889 of them were what we'd call moderate complexity. So for example, they must have had at least 2 of these 3 parameters, either 4 unique functions over 13 unique formulas, or at least 20 lines of VBA code. And so if you hit that threshold, we consider you at least a moderately complex spreadsheet, which required some thought. And so that was quite a high number of spreadsheets which matched that criteria. So when we looked in, we thought, okay, if we assume that it takes about 2 hours to build a spreadsheet, then in total, 1,778 hours of building we spent building spreadsheets that would never be used again, which is 58 days of time spent building spreadsheets, which is quite a lot for just 87 people. When we dug a bit deeper, we found that actually, of those 87 people, 21 of them, which is actually 24%, had built 775 of the spreadsheets, which is 84% of the total number of spreadsheets. And so just those 21 people alone had spent 44 days just building spreadsheets that they would never use again. And so the conclusion from our solution was, you now have a business case to move to a dedicated platform, such as a BI platform. And so this is an example of how we're using our software to solve problems, not just in the risk space, but in the value as well. So once you can realize the value of your spreadsheets, you can then make more of it and even help you to digitalization initiatives. So this is the first case. The next case we're looking at is now beyond looking at just spreadsheets. A spreadsheet doesn't live in isolation. A spreadsheet is built by a person. And so understanding the people behind spreadsheets is also very important. So in this other example with one of our clients, they had a middle office operation which was offshore. And this middle office did much of the processing, and much of the processing was done via spreadsheets, as is typical in most banks. Now, this bank was about to move to a high version of Office, and they were concerned that a lot of the spreadsheets would break. Because middle office does a lot of processing, repetitive tasks, the assumption was that a lot of these spreadsheets had VBA code, which are running daily tasks over and over again, which was a reasonable assumption. When they looked in it, they only found 13 files with VBA code, which was shocking to them. But again, they considered it a win and thought, actually, we can move now comfortably to the next version of Office, and we're not really impacted. It's only 13 spreadsheets out of over 400 spreadsheets. So they were quite satisfied. Now, with the Workscope platform, again, we looked at the value that was made visible from this. And so if we go a bit deeper, we now found that actually of those 13 add-ins, there was one particular add-in, which was called the utilities.xlam, which was used by 35 people. And this add-in only had one developer. So we picked up only one person had actually made changes to this file. And over the course of the 3 months, this one individual had made 42 changes to this one file. So they were clearly the owner of this file. And in this file, once our platform analyzed it, it had over 32,000 lines of VBA code. Now, the problem here is 2. Firstly, you have a lot of VBA code in an application. So on inspecting the VBA code, we realized that actually it was very well built, good error handling, good structure, very well planned, very well architected. But the problem wasn't the VBA code. The problem was that this file was supported by one person. So what this file actually was doing was, it was a utility. So if I wanted to build anything, I'd use my utility to load data from system A, from system B, perform this calculation, insert it back into system C. And so everyone used this as a way to work. And so this individual realized that by having this utility, everyone was calculating things the same way. which was very efficient. They were using the same infrastructure and everyone would benefit. And so conceptually, it was a brilliant idea. The only problem was that this individual supported this whole middle office. And so if he got hit by a bus, then it was game over for the department. And so the recommendation was, which they took on board, move this developer into the tactical development team, where he was given support, proper documentation, and all the code was QA'd. And so again, this is not what the company was looking for, but this could have been a massive disaster had anything gone wrong. But now they were able to realize the value. So at the end of it, eventually the number went up from 35 users, closest to near 100, because now a supported application that could be rolled out across the business. And so these are the things that we're looking at. We're not just looking at the risks in the spreadsheet. For example, I have 20 spreadsheets which have errors. We're trying to ask the question, why do you have these 20 spreadsheets and what are they doing for your organization? So if we dig a bit deeper, what we're now trying to do is basically understand the bigger picture. So here, typically, most solutions, EUC solutions, will look at an individual spreadsheet and say, well, what's wrong with this spreadsheet? What are issues with this spreadsheet? We're looking at, well, how does this spreadsheet fit in my organization? Does it have any dependencies? Does it rely on anything? Are other things dependent on it? So once you start understanding the landscape in which you are working in, you can make better decisions. So in this example, if I want to move to a new platform, I want to move all my files to SharePoint. I can't just move my file in isolation. I need to understand all the other files around me that are connected. So I move them together as a unit. And that's what we're really trying to help you understand. What processes exist around your spreadsheets, not just what spreadsheets exist. Once you understand this, you can then move on and start solving other problems more efficiently. So for example, if we are moving organizations to SharePoint off the network drive, is it worth moving all the inactive files? No, because typically that's thousands of files that no one's used in months or years. So why move them and spend all that time and energy sending out questionnaires? We can detect that, so we'll just move the files that are just actually in use. And when it comes to things like model complexity, if we have really, really complex models, maybe they require special attention. So maybe we put them under a different QA process. If a model hits a certain threshold of lines of VBA code or number of formulas or functions, then we govern it differently. Maybe it goes into a different repository and it's managed better. And thirdly, even if a file and everything's working well, as new files come online, you should be asking the question, why are we constantly building new spreadsheets? Is it efficient use of our time? Are we solving problems efficiently? Once we understand all of this, we can now start making calculations on the return on our investment. Are we spending our time wisely and efficiently by building spreadsheets? So what we're trying to look at is the layer on top of the spreadsheets. We're taking a macro view of your landscape. And so in the first example we gave, even though our developer had built an add-in which was very robust, what if you have one add-in which isn't robust? And so all these other applications that appear fine are sitting on something which is a very, very shaky foundation. What we're trying to do is highlight and show you where these issues are. And then once you understand that, you can then understand the risks involved in those processes. You can solidify them and put better controls around them. And once you move beyond the files, you can then understand that files don't live in isolation. They're created by people to solve problems. So once you understand what these are, you can then provide better support for your people in terms of what they're doing with these files to put better governance around it, better training around it, so you can reduce the amount of key person risk that you may have. And ultimately, what we're trying to do is give you enough tools and information and metrics to be able to make stronger business cases for moves to newer platforms, more investment in Excel if you need it, but you have the numbers now to back up what you're trying to achieve. And so that's the purpose of our platform, really, to give you that context and analysis. And so that's the conclusion of the demo.